We're going to have a study sheet video here of English 1, Unit 1, and to help you get ready for this test. First thing we need to talk about is ownership and how to show possession. You're going to have there'll be some questions on the test regarding punctuation showing possession. They'll be in sentence form. Know the following information for these problems. Okay, to show separate ownership, we have Rich's with an apostrophe and Don's with an apostrophe dogs. That means that Rich has a dog and Don has a dog. But to show joint ownership, we only make the second name possessive, Rich and Don's dog. This makes it clear that there's really only one dog that Rich and Don both jointly own together. The next thing we want to cover concerning possessives is forming the possessive of a noun that is plural, but the plural form does not end in S, such as men and children. These are plural nouns that are irregular because they don't form their plurals by adding S like a regular noun does. So because they are plural but they do not end in S, to become a plural possessive you simply add an apostrophe and an S. So, now we know that plural nouns that do end in S form their possessive by adding an apostrophe after the S, as in the James, as in like a family name, the James. To make this possessive, we simply just add an apostrophe after the S. Here we talk about collective nouns. Collective nouns are nouns that name a group of more than one person, place, or thing. As an example is committee. Next we'll cover concrete nouns. Concrete nouns are nouns that name a physical object that can be perceived by the senses. The senses. We can see it, we can feel it, we can hear it, we can taste it, we can smell it, okay? Those are the concrete nouns. So an example of a concrete noun would be a pencil. This is something I can perceive with my senses. Okay? But let's say truth. Truth is a noun, but it's not a concrete noun because it's not something I can either see, taste, smell, hear, touch, etc. Okay, it's still a noun, it's still something, but it's not something that I can perceive with one of those natural physical senses. You're not asked this in your test, but truth would be what's considered an abstract noun, as opposed to pencil, which is a concrete noun. Now we have a list here of irregular nouns. I just noticed on the study sheet it says irregular verbs, which is rather interesting because these are not verbs. These are nouns. But here's just a few irregular ones, and you notice the singular form of them and the plural form of them. There's several more listed on your study sheet. You'll need to be familiar with those and how they form their plural. Alright, now we're going to cover a can be very confusing issue, is transitive and intransitive. So I know I helped some of you with this while you were doing your unit, but let's go over it real quick. Okay, so first of all we have transitive verbs. Okay, and an example of a sentence with a transitive verb is this one. The new mother held the infant tenderly. Why is this verb transitive? Okay, and think of transitive as transferable. Okay, all right, so we have action. First of all, for a verb to be transitive, it has to be an action verb. It cannot be a linking verb. Linking verbs have no action to transfer. But here we have the new mother. The new mother, what did she do? She held. This is our verb. Okay, now, is there anything in this sentence that receives this action? The new mother held the infant tenderly. Yes, there is. The infant. This is a direct object. It's receiving the action of the verb. Therefore, this verb is transitive. Its action transfers to something. All right, so the next example we have here is a sentence with the verb that is intransitive or doesn't transfer the action. So we have the star. What did the star do? The star fell. This is our verb. Okay? Is there anything that receives the action of fell? Well, here we have a prepositional phrase. So our sentence pattern, noun, verb, stops there because all we have after that is a prepositional phrase. So this action stops right here. It does not transfer anywhere. So this is an example of an intransitive verb. It makes a difference on whether it has a direct object in the sentence that receives the action. So two ways that a verb can be intransitive. One, by being a linking verb. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, because there's no action to transfer. The other way it can be intransitive is if the sentence pattern stops with the verb and there is no direct object that receives the action of the verb. Then the verb would be intransitive also. All right, and then we have, we need to know that our tenses of our verbs, which is just the time that an action took place, are formed from the principal parts. Then you need to know the principal parts of the verb buy. Present is buy. Today I buy. Yesterday, for past, yesterday I bought. And past participle says in the past I, and you add the helping verb have bought. Know those principal parts of the verb buy. Another thing about verbs here. Verbs have mood, tense, and voice. The definition for a verb's mood is the manner in which the action is presented. That's what indicates the mood. So remember, manner and mood match up. And then we have, every verb has tense, which just means the time the action is, the time that is indicated in the action. So time is indicated by tense. So time tense would match up. And then the subject being acted upon or receiving the action indicates a verb's voice. So here we go. Here's one of our moods, a subjunctive mood. When it's expressed, a verb is expressed in a subjunctive mood, it expresses either a wish, a condition contrary to fact, or a that clause expressing necessity. Know that, know this, it is not. It is not a statement of fact. Subjunctive mood does not show a statement of fact. Now we have a sentence. He liked to eat pizza often. Consequently, he gained weight. And in this question, you are supposed to name what type of conjunction or connecting word that the word consequently is. You have the choices of conjunctive adverb, coordinating conjunction, correlative conjunction, subordinating conjunction. This is the example of a conjunctive adverb. For one thing, it ends in ly. That kind of gives you an idea of it being an adverb. Next, we're going to have to choose in a sentence whether to use the word between or among. Which one is correct? Well, my sister and I have about 16 outfits blank us. Between or among? That is the question. So, how do we decide this? Well, let's look at what the two meanings of between and among are. Between refers to two persons, places, or things. Among refers to more than two persons, places, or things. How many people are we referring to in this sentence? We're referring to sister and I. So when it's referring to two people or things, we use the word between. Because the word among means more than two are being compared. Now here we have two sentences with a prepositional phrase in it. Prepositional phrases act in the sentence as either an adjective, either they're modifying a noun like a single adjective does, or they're acting as an adverb and they're telling how, when, where, and why something in the sentence happens. So the first sentence is an example of how an adjective prepositional phrase would act in the sentence. The picture on the wall is my mother. So obviously it's describing what picture, modifying the noun. So that makes it an adjective prepositional phrase. The next sentence, Bobby is jogging in the park. Okay, this sentence, the prepositional phrase is talking about where Bobby is jogging. We know it's not modifying Bobby because we couldn't say Bobby in the park is jogging. I mean, you can't say that, but somebody might think you were not very smart. Okay, so in the park, jogging. So this prepositional phrase is acting as an adverb. Okay, remember a while ago we talked about collective nouns, that they refer to a group. So here we have an example of a collective noun, church. Okay? So church, is it considered, we have to give it a pronoun here because it's an antecedent for this pronoun that's going to go right here. The church gave its or their schedule for the week in the bulletin. Which is it? Well, if it's singular, you use its. If it's plural, you use their. So what is it? The church. Obviously, the church refers to more than one person, but it is a collective noun, so it's seen as singular. The difference is when it is acting as one unit doing something, then it is singular. Now, if it's acting as individuals, say I change the sentence here to the church gave their offerings. Then we're talking about the individual church members giving their offerings. In that case, you would use their because church is referring to it in a plural form. But here, church is seen as singular because it is giving its schedule. It's not every individual member giving their schedule, but the church as one unit is giving its schedule in the bulletin. Example of how a collective noun must agree, its pronoun and its antecedent must agree. All right, here we have a sentence, another sentence where we must put a pronoun in the blank and the pronoun has to agree with its antecedent, which in this sentence, each of the players on the boys basketball team must give blank best effort. The antecedent here is each that has to be agreed with. Okay, each is what is referred to as an in indefinite pronoun. An indefinite pronoun. It's not sure how many, it's indefinite what it's referring to. But each is considered a singular indefinite pronoun. A singular indefinite pronoun. So we want, that makes us then choose the singular pronoun to match this antecedent of each. So what are our choices here? Her? Well, let's not do her since it is the boys basketball team. Okay, so is it there? Is there singular? No, there is plural. So here we must put in the pronoun that agrees with the antecedent that is singular by using the pronoun his. All right. This study sheet is jumping around from subject to subject quite a bit. That's because there was so much information in, pardon me, contained in your unit because it was a review unit of language. So now we're jumping to identifying whether a subordinate clause is a noun, adjective, or an adverb. So in this sentence, the girl who bought a dress forgot her purse. Okay, what is our main thought in this sentence? Our main thought is the girl forgot her purse. The girl forgot her purse. So that makes our clause here, who bought a dress. Now we've got to decide whether this clause is acting as an adjective, an adverb, or a noun clause. And these are pretty easy to figure out because if they come right behind a noun and it's obvious they're talking about that noun, then it is an adjective clause. The girl, what girl? The girl who bought a dress. So in this sentence we have an adjective clause. One more sentence here that we have to identify what the subordinate clause is acting as. And if we read the sentence, if we don't run out of gas, we should arrive on time. The main clause in this sentence is that we should arrive on time. That's what your main clause is saying. So that makes this part, this subordinate clause, if we don't run out of gas. Not glass, gas. If we don't run out of gas. So, is this clause acting as an adjective? Is it modifying we? We if we don't run out of gas? No, it's telling when we should arrive. We should arrive if we don't run out of gas. So this clause is telling about when we should arrive, which is our verb, which makes this an adverb clause. Okay, we're going to jump to verbals here, and verbal phrases. Remember, a verbal is just a word that is a verb form. So it looks like a verb, but is acting as something else, either an adjective or an adverb or a noun. And there are three types of verbals, and one of them is a gerund. Okay, so here we have Carson enjoys reading his Bible on the front porch. Do you see a word that looks like it should be a verb, but it's not? It is reading. Carson, this is your verb, enjoys, and this is the thing that he enjoys. So this is a gerund. Remember that gerunds end only in ing and act only as nouns. Now, it's not the only verbal that acts as a noun, but it will never act as anything else except a noun. If it ends in ing, it's being used as a noun, then it is a gerund. Okay, another sentence here. And wow, look at this. We have the same word that's being used as the verbal here. Remember, we're talking about verbals, verb forms that are acting like something else. This one, though, is not a gerund, even though it's the same word. But in this case, the girl reading her book had a little dog named Harry. It is being used as a participle. Okay, why? Because of how it's functioning in the sentence, okay? The last time, reading a book was something he did. In this case, the girl reading her book, we're referring back to girl here. So it's modifying the word girl. What modifies nouns? Adjectives. So participles as a verbal can end in, they end in ing when being used in the present form. End in ing, as can verbals. As do gerunds. End in ing. They also, in the past form, can end in d, ed, t, n, and I think en in the past form. So they can also have those suffixes attached to them. Okay, but in this case, it's a participle. A participle acts only as an adjective. I should have had this written out already. Okay. So we have the same word as we had in our last sentence, reading, but because in the last sentence it was being used as a noun, it acted as a gerund. In this sentence, it's being used as an adjective, so it's acting as an adjective. It is a participle because it's acting as an adjective and not as a noun. All right, our last sentence covering our last type of verbal. As his first activity of the day, he planned the phrase to clean his room. To clean is our verbal here. This is my favorite kind of verbal to pick out because to me it's easy. It's to plus a verb form. The only thing you have to make sure you don't do is confuse it with a prepositional phrase, which a prepositional phrase might start with the word to, but it doesn't have a verb form in it at all. So this is to clean, which that is one of the infinitive is to plus a verb form. Now infinitives can act as nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, and I got a little messy down there at the bottom, got close to the end of the board. I apologize for that. So the bottom of the board, actually. So infinitives, to plus a verb form. Usually pretty easy to find. Sometimes not so easy to figure out how they're acting as, but you're not going to have to do that in this sentence. You're only going to have to tell that it is an infinitive. To clean. Infinitives, to plus a verb form. Now, infinitives and participle phrases can function only as adjectives. Gerund phrases function as nouns only, and infinitive phrases, that is a wrong statement there in your study sheet, because infinitives can act as nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. But participial phrases, participles and participial phrases can only function as adjectives, and then gerunds only function as nouns. And I think we covered that pretty clearly. Okay, so we have an appositive here. And on your study sheet, it just gives the definition of what an appositive is. A noun or pronoun that follows another noun or pronoun in a sentence to identify or explain it is called an appositive. You'll have to know that definition. I just put an example up here. George, our mailman, got sick. This is an example of an appositive. It's just more information. It's not a clause. It's an appositive phrase. It just tells about the noun or pronoun that is in front of it. An appositive phrase. You'll need to know that definition on that. It's probably a fill in the blank. All right, here we're going to talk about sentence patterns. You can have 4 different sentence patterns here. Simple, with just one sentence pattern in it, or you can have 2 sentences, like 2 sentences put together, the compound, complex, and then compound, complex. I think of simple as just one. Okay, it's one sentence pattern. Okay, compound is 2 sentence patterns, and they're 2 independent clauses that could stand alone as a sentence. I think of complex as 1.5, because what a complex sentence pattern is it has 2 clauses in it, but one of them is subordinate and one of them is a main clause. The subordinate clause couldn't stand alone as a sentence. It's kind of like a semi-truck driving with a trailer on the back of it. The truck part would be the main clause, and the trailer that's coming behind it would be carrying it. So that the main clause has to carry the subordinate or dependent clause along behind it. So I consider it 1.5. And then you've got your compound complex, which means that you have two clauses that could stand alone in a sentence plus an extra subordinate clause in the middle of it. So it's kind of like a 2 compound with a half on it. That's just my little trick of how I remember it. So here's an example of a sentence, and we're going to have to decide which of these is which sentence pattern that this belongs to. So we have, because we had to go to a party, we left school early. Okay, so our main clause, our main thought of the sentence, of course, is we left school early. So this is our main clause, we left school early. So what have we got left here? We've got because we had to go to a party. Okay, we have a subject, we have verb, but this part could not stand alone as a sentence. It is a subordinate or a dependent clause. It's dependent on the main clause to exist. So what we have here is a main clause and a subordinate clause. So here we have a complex sentence pattern. It's like 1.5. It's got a main clause and one subordinate clause. Okay, still looking at our 4 types of sentence patterns there. We have a new sentence. We never talked to Rob, the guy with the tickets to the game. Okay, at first glance we're thinking, oh yeah, we've got a main clause and a subordinate clause here. Because of the comma, it kind of gives you that idea. Because we have a main clause, we never talked to Rob. But let's look at the rest of this sentence very carefully. The guy with the tickets to the game. We got a problem here because it's got a lot of words, so we could assume that it's a clause. But there's a noun here. Remember, to be a clause, it's got to have a subject and a verb. We've got a noun here. Do we have a verb? We have no verb. So this is a phrase. It's actually in a positive phrase. It's all talking about Rob. It's just more explanatory material about Rob, the guy with the tickets to the game. So what we have here, what kind of sentence pattern? Is it simple, compound, complex, or compound, complex? Remember, to be compound, it's got to have 2 main clauses. To be complex, it's got to have a main clause and a subordinate clause. And then compound complex is even more. So what do we have here? We just have a simple sentence, because it really only has the one sentence pattern in it. So I'm starting off with a blank board here on this part. So we're going to kind of go as we go, because we're to the matching section here. And basically it's all just on your study sheet. But just remember that intransitive verbs have no receiver of the action name. In other words, there's no direct object after the verb. Write that on your study sheet after intransitive verbs. No direct object after the verb. And then past participle is just a principal part of verbs. Future passive, you will be seeing its action that happens to the subject in the future. Okay, it's future passive. It happens to the subject, that makes it passive, and it happens in the future, so it makes it future passive. And then verb tense, remember tense and time go together. And linking verb is followed by a predicate adjective or predicate nominative that renames or describes the subjects. Okay? Linking verbs have a predicate adjective or predicate nominative that come after them. Verb mood is the manner in which the action is presented. So remember, mood and manner. Regular verbs, just regular old verbs, form their past and past participles by adding ed, d, or t. And then an active voice verb is one where the subject names the actor. The subject names the actor. In other words, the subject is doing the action. And then we have auxiliary, which just means helping. such helping verbs as to have and to be. Auxiliary, remember, means helping. Transitive verbs are the opposite of intransitive verbs. They have a receiver of the action. Make a note, they do have a direct object. Transitive verbs have a direct object. Then subjunctive mood presents a condition contrary to fact. That was really covered in your test already. Comparative degree is when two persons, objects, or actions are compared. Then imperative sentences, imperative mood, whatever it may be, expresses a command. Passive voice is when the subject names the receiver. That's when the action is being done to the subject. Action happens to the subject instead of the subject doing the action. Next question we cover here is, do interjections occur without being accompanied by other words? Here's your answer. Yes. Okay, there you go. You can have that all by itself. It is a sentence. It does not have to be accompanied by other words if it's an interjection. And then last of all, just know that adverb clauses in sentences are introduced by subordinating conjunctions. You can refer back to your section on your study sheet where we had a sentence that we had to identify what type of clause it was. It was, if we don't run out of gas, we should arrive on time. That was an adverb clause. It was introduced or began. The adverb clause began with what is called a subordinating conjunction. In this case, it was if. There's quite a list of them. It doesn't appear that you have to know for this test. You just need to know that subordinating conjunctions introduce adverb clauses. And this concludes our study sheet for English 1, Unit 1, the first of 10 for the year. This was a long one, so study well.